Hello folks, my name is Matthew Street and welcome to my channel. So happy you're here. And guess what, kiddies? It's another episode of Matt Mangles McCartney. Yes, it's been too long since we did Give My Regards to Broad Street. And I'm back after several weeks and gotta get this series going and keep the episodes coming. So I hope you'll join me. I hope you have checked out other episodes of Matt Mangles McCartney. And I hope if you have not, perhaps you'll go back. I created a playlist with every episode in the series, and you can go back and check it out. And for those of you that are new to this is basically my long-running series of how Paul's solo album releases intertwined with my personal life from 1970 with McCartney. We're going to go all the way right up to Egypt Station, and who knows, by the time this series ends, perhaps there'll be another Paul McCartney release. So, where did we leave off last time on Matt Mangles McCartney? Well, it was 1984. I had gotten engaged to Mrs. Street. And of course, in October of 1984, Give My Regards to Broad Street was released. Mrs. Street graduated nursing school. She was working in a hospital on the midnight shift. I was working at my uncle's shop trying to finish up my school and make a life for myself so we could both, once we got married, we could have a future together, a decent future together. And I remember that year, Rupert and the Frog song came out. We All Stand Together. Who remembers that one? 1984. 85 comes along, and my wedding happened that spring. Yes, me and Mrs. Street tied the knot. And then in November of 85, a few months after I got married, Spies Like Us was released by Paul as a single. Made it to number 7. Not bad for Paul. Pretty good, you gotta say. But 1986, folks, would be the year of change for Paul and for me. 1986, Paul left Columbia Records. His contract with Columbia was all done, and he was going to be going back with EMI. And as for me, well, 1986 was a big year. I had just been married, but Mrs. Street was expecting our first child. Yes. It still amazes me now to think of this, but we were expecting our first child. It was also the year that I finally finished school and I landed a little job and started my career, which would be there for the next 29 years to support my family. That was coming, that was impending. So 1986 were big changes. My wife and I were looking into getting a little place for ourselves, a little fix-me-up special. Didn't cost much money, but it was something we could call our own. Our little place in the universe to build our life and to build our family together. And so that's what 1986 reminds me of. But 1986 also reminds me of Press to Play, the release of Paul McCartney's Press to Play album. Yes, folks, it was July of 1986, and the single Press was released. Now, it's a travesty to me that the single only made number 21 on the charts. I'm shocked and dismayed because it's probably my favorite song on this album and one of my favorite Paul pop songs of all time. And why it didn't do better, maybe someone of you out there can explain it to me in the comments. Why didn't the song Press do better? It was a fabulous, fabulous song. It is a fabulous song. And the promotional video for Press is second to none. It's one of my favorite Paul videos ever. He's down in the London Underground. He's mixing it up with the fans and with the commuters and the crowd. It's just a wonderful, make you smile, make you feel good kind of video. I love it. It's fabulous. And I'm going to say it's probably my favorite. It's got to be in my top 3 favorite videos of Paul's of all time. Now, August 25th is when the actual album was released. And again, it only made number 30 on the charts, folks, here in America. I think it made like top 10 in the UK. I'm not sure the rest of the world, but in America, this only hit number 30. Paul was slipping a little bit at this point, folks. The triumph of Tug of War, and then he slipped a little bit with Pipes of Peace, and then he slipped a little bit more with Give My Regards to Broad Street. But this was another slip for Paul, folks. And I have to admit, I've been kind of hard on this album over the years, but I'm going to say right now, in the interest of full disclosure and honesty, it's not as bad as I have made it out to be in the past. And I'll tell you why right now and explain how I've had a little bit of a change of heart. For one thing, just this by itself, the 10 songs, it's kind of mezza for me. You know, it's like a C, you know, fair. It's kind of on the bottom. And in my recent Bottom Feeders video about Paul's albums, I did throw Press to Play in there as the third from the bottom. Because in and of itself, the 10 songs on here are fair at best. I mean, I shouldn't say that. The album as a whole with those 10 songs is fair at best. However, when you throw this in the mix, this has made Press a much better album for me. Why? Because I love the 3 bonus tracks that you got on the CD and the cassette that you didn't get on the vinyl. You're talking Right Away, It's Not True, and Tough on a Tightrope. I love those 3 songs. If you don't like them, don't ask me why I love them so much, but I love them. I'm not sure how the rest of you feel about those 3 songs, but for me, when you add those 3 songs to these 10, it makes for a much better Press to Play album in my book. Now, let me tell you something else about this album. This was the first album that I bought 3 different formats on the same day for a Paul album. I bought the vinyl, I bought the CD, and I bought the cassette. Like I said, it was just the onset of CDs here, folks. 8 tracks were long gone. Cassettes were still popular to play in your car. And of course, vinyl was kind of at the end of the road. It was around late 80s, 86, 87, when vinyl was starting to go out and CDs were coming in big. So it was at that crossroads. So I grabbed the CD because I didn't have a CD player. When did CD players come out? 84 or 85? I didn't have a CD player then, but I did get a CD player in 86. And I still had my record player. So I bought 3 formats. I wanted the cassette for the car, I wanted this for my new CD player, and plus the 3 extra songs. And I wanted this as my vinyl collection was still pretty good at that point, and I wanted the vinyl. So that was the first time I think I ever did that, and it might have been the last time that I did that, because, you know, shortly thereafter, kind of the vinyl went by the wayside. CDs became the norm, and cassettes kind of faded a little bit. So I think that was the first and only time I bought 3 formats for a Paul album. But anyway, those 3 songs made it better for me. Later in the year, October of 86, Stranglehold was released as a single. It didn't chart, I don't believe. If it did, let me know, but I don't think it made much of an impact. And funnily enough, I do love Stranglehold. I think it's a pretty good song. Only Love Remains did get released eventually, I think later in the winter of 86. And I think it made like top 10 in the adult contemporary charts, but it didn't do much beyond that. And it had a pretty good little video for it. And that's also around the time period, November of 86, when my first child was born. My son was born in November of 86. And, you know, I think back on it now, folks, and this album reminds me of that period of Mrs. Street and I having our first child. And it's amazing how to think he's going to be 34 years old in a couple of months. Oh, my goodness. And he's the father of my 2 grandchildren, which made me a grandpa. Where does the time go, folks? You know, how does time go by so fast? How does your life... I sound like an old fogey, I know, an old fart here, but, you know, when you're a little kid, you're young or a young adult, you think you've got forever. You've got forever. And the old people would say to you, oh, you don't realize how fast life goes by. And you go, yeah, you old folks, you think life goes by so quick. But isn't it funny, any of you that are up there with me, folks, do you see what I'm saying here, how fast life goes? You know, for that little boy who was born when this album came out, and now he's 34 with 2 children of his own, it just knocks me out, blows my mind. So the memories, although this isn't my favorite Paul's album, there are a lot of wonderful memories attached to it with Mrs. Street, starting our life together, having our first child, getting our first little, you know, money pit house, so to speak, and fixing it up and moving on through life, you know, having met at Burger King when we were just 16 and we had been through so much, and to get to that point, starting a little life together, that's what this album reminds me of. So for that, I've got to give some affection and give some love to Press to Play, because it does bring back many wonderful memories. It is an ambitious album, I will say. Paul did try to mix it up a little bit on this album with the sounds. And I have to say that it has grown on me over the years. It went from an album that I was very sour on, and even up until recently, in the last few years, I would always rank this album very low in my Paul rankings. And like I said, it was on my Bottom Feeders video. But I have to say, folks, I've grown in affection for this album. I like, the good for me would be like the songs Press, Only Love Remains, However Absurd. Move Over Busker is good. I like Stranglehold. I like Good Times Coming, Feel the Sun. And then when you add in Right Away, It's Not True, and Tough on a Tightrope, well, that's a good bunch of songs that I do enjoy. And the bad are really only Talk More Talk, Footprints, Pretty Little Head, Angry. You know, those are kind of the songs I can't get into that much. So I have to concede, when you have the 13 full songs on this, it's a pretty good album. It's okay. It reminds me of life's transitions. Transitions for Paul, transitions for me in my life. It's the transition album. You know, starting life, starting over again, that's what this album is all about to me. New sounds for Paul, new beginnings, a future coming for him with big changes in the next 2 or 3 years, where he would start touring again, getting involved in putting a band together for shows, and putting out the next edition of Matt Mangles McCartney as an album that I truly like and enjoy, and an album that brings back so many wonderful memories for me, which is Flowers in the Dirt, and we'll be doing that in the next episode. Also in the fall, when this album came out, it was my grandfather, my maternal grandfather's 90th birthday, and we had a big birthday party for him, I remember. And it wasn't too long after this album was released that he passed away. And so, you know what? It brings back memories of that time for me in my life before the big changes happened, when we started losing loved ones in my personal life, like grandparents, and everybody was getting older, and then my parents would become the older generation, so to speak, and now I'm the older generation. You know, it's like, you know, thank goodness my dad is still here, and he just turned 90 years old. Funnily enough, he's doing well. You saw him in some recent videos, but life moves on, folks, and this album brings me back to that transition period, that point when things in life started to change, and you move on. You just move forward in your life, and I think many of you can relate to that. So, you know what? Press to Play is okay with me. It's okay in my book. It brings back a lot of wonderful memories in my life, and I'm sure Paul has some cherished moments in his life when he thinks about this album and being with Linda in that beautiful picture taken by George Harrell, who was a famous Hollywood photographer in the 30s and 40s. He used the same exact camera he used then to take the series of pictures, and I think it's a wonderful cover, wonderful picture of Paul and Linda, and it just reminds me of the love I share for my wife, Mrs. Street, because you can just see the love and affection Paul and Linda have for each other in that photo. So, you know what? Not a bad little album. It's okay in my book. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Matt Mangles McCartney. I hope you'll come back again for the next edition, Flowers in the Dirt. Bless you all. Thanks for being here, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.